Alright bros, here we are again. Back for another round. The second time, the second coming, one could even argue. What world am I on? Probably not the right world. Yeah, definitely not the right world. I need to be able to click on people so I can teleport places without having to put in any effort myself. That's the goal here. That's the plan, at least. And boy, is it ever a good plan. It's probably the best plan, actually, but we'll see. We'll see how things go. This time I'm going to try one without any music, so we'll see what I think works better, or what I like better. But yeah. Anyways, denizens of the internet, the good guys, how you guys doing? Probably fine, I'm going to assume. Oh, I should probably fix... This is so far to click. Oof. Let's get it over here. I'll fix it so it's right near my bank so I can do the Yeah, modern layout, I know, I don't like fixed. Sue me. Sue me. Okay, let's get her right up where she needs to be. There we go. I'm too lazy for bank fillers, so yeah. So we're gonna have to deal with this. And boop, doop. Let's drink one of these too while I'm at it, just so I can, yeah, not efficient. Oh well. There we go, at least better now. Not perfect, but good enough. It'll do. So yeah, so today I think I'm going to talk about what's wrong with the game. What is the big problem with RuneScape right now? What's the issue here? What's the major malfunction? Where are things going awry? And that's a complicated question, actually. So if we could if we're going to pick what the biggest problem with old school RuneScape is, I think I know what it is, but it's also going to be a real-time cancellation record. But I'm cool with that, honestly. Like, if I lose my job or if I get murdered in real life over this, like, I don't need the job in particular. I can retire already if I felt like it. And if I die for my political opinions, is that such a big loss? Like, so many people throughout history have died. If I get, like, doxxed and someone comes and stabs me from the tolerant people that exist out there, is it a big deal? Not really. Perfect, 0 kg. Just double checking before I waste a bunch of stamina. So anyways, let's start off by talking about what the big problem with RuneScape is, specifically old school RuneScape. And this, of course, is going to play into a number of factors and going to expand outwards. Also, I know I started the real-time cancellation speedrun after I got all the Ryuji out. Ryuji Shinai, as the weebs say, as a weeb might say, by acting like a dick in the previous episode. Bwahaha. But anyways, so back on point. So what's the big problem? I've been dancing around it, but I think it's time that we talked about it. So something that made me quit the game for around 6 months a while back was Blizzard and, let's say, old school RuneScape gave in to this idea that, you know, a certain political opinion needs to be expressed in the video game, and so they've made the video game political. I used to not really think RuneScape was political. I used to think it was probably one of the only places that didn't have this sort of Marxist taint that's running through the rest of society, and I was wrong. It happens. You know, and that probably is more of a factor of the people working at RuneScape changing, just like the people working at Blizzard changing, just like the original people who built these games changing. And so I think before we talk about, you know, the hubris event and why, for instance, something that really doesn't impact me personally is the biggest problem with the game, and in fact is the biggest problem with society as a whole. And I know it's a pretty hard sell, but stick with me for at least a little bit. You're already this far in, you might as well just fucking go all the way, right? Just fucking YOLO, as one would say. Alright, I need to stop swearing though, that's very rude. So, let's define some terms. First of all, let's define what being woke is. I know that's kind of a hot button issue these days, and the reality is wokeness is just defined as anti-white racism. That's the reason a lot of the conservative cucks refuse to actually discuss it, or talk about it in detail, but the term wokeness literally just refers to anti-white racism. Like, let's just call it what it is. You know, I'm someone, at least personally, that, you know, has to focus on honesty, and throughout my personal journey through life, like being a absolute troll that I am, that's always been my biggest struggle because I just can't help myself. It is my one true original sin. So with that being said, that, you know, oh, heck, that wokeness is defined as racism. So what is racism? Racism, of course, is just the, you know, preference or mistreatment of someone, or, you know, judging people a book by its cover, in essence. And one, I don't think there's something innately wrong with that to begin with. It's you know, something humans have evolved intentionally so, and it's, you know, beneficial for evolution. Say what you will about it. You know, the guy with 3 legs is not someone that should be, you know, reproductively successful. The Marigold-looking, you know, eye cell should not be successful with the ladies. That's just how it is. That really can't be helped, and that's more so baked into the deal, at least as far as human beings go. And maybe we'll advance beyond that. And let's see, what's the second thing we need to define? So we've defined what woke is, we've defined what racism is, and now let's define what pride is. So pride is, you know, a sin, and I think I can just drape everything under the Rainbow Coalition as a sin. And I know this is taking like a super religious bent to it, but you can't talk about politics without religion. The two are inseparable. We live in a Judeo-Christian society. Our values come from Judeo-Christian beliefs, and whether or not you want to admit it, whether or not you're religious, the fact of the matter is, I'm gonna run out of stamina. I'm a bloody mong. Whoopsie. But the fact of the matter is that the pretense of good and evil from our society is based solely on Judeo-Christian values, and there's nothing particularly wrong with that. For instance, if you look at other cultures, let's just talk about the age of consent. For instance, under Sharia law, the age of consent is 9 because Muhammad, peace be with him, deflowered his wife Aisha when she was 9. Now, that's not something that's morally acceptable here in the West, but that's a reality, and, you know, I don't think harping on it or, you know, trying to judge other cultures by it is ideal, but you could certainly argue that that would be a racist statement. Oh boy, I'm getting super canceled for this, but so be it. I already probably figured this long before I actually decided to continue YouTubing in current year. And so, this is a roundabout way of going it, but the reason why everything produced by millennials is awful is because millennials have forgotten Judeo-Christian values. No matter how you want to phrase it, we can just look at Lord of the Rings. That's another thing that was recently in the news, is, you know, the hot button, you know, normie talking point. Lord of the Rings is a story about Judeo-Christian values. Like, spoilers, you know, I know anyone that's actually read the books or watched the movies or, you know, understands Judeo-Christian values can draw the conclusions, and I'm not going to explain them here. You can research it on your own, but the reason why the remakes of Lord of the Rings were bad and why the originals were good was because the originals understood Judeo-Christian values, and each individual person as an entity goes through their own hero's quest. Our society is based off the mythos of the hero quest, and if we're going to function in a society and continue to develop as a society, we have to at least begin to try to pretend to understand that those values are what have built us, and our society is basically a religious society. Whether or not you like that, whether or not you think that should change, that's one thing. And so we can assume that there are universal good and evils, right? There's a universal good and there's a universal evil. That's just, you know, factual at this point. And we certainly, as human beings, do not live up to the universal goods at all. Like, for instance, PETA is right. Period. Eating meat is a sin. It is bad. You know, I don't care if we have dominion over the animals and we have a right to slaughter them. Humans, as a species, should not be doing that. That's just not proper. Like, you know it's wrong. Even if you don't instinctively feel it's wrong, you can look at, you know, certain animals and say, yeah, I should not kill and consume that. And it's not just because the meat might not be valuable. The meat could be valuable, and it's still, like, sort of like cows in India, you know, depending on your culture and your society. It's innately wrong, you know, and there are things that you can say that are innately wrong and that are not, I think, as big of an issue because they're not eternal issues. Going forward, the concept of meat will change eventually. Science will have like lab-grown meat or, you know, some sort of hyper different food alternatives that simply are more calorically dense and just better for us in general. So, you know, and diet and all of that in the future isn't really going to be a concern. It's not going to exist as far as time goes out. The same thing as like another hot button issue would be like abortion, for instance. And that, again, it's just a problem of science. It's solved eventually over time. While it might be a hot topic issue now, going forward, if humanity isn't killed by the great filter, aka Marxism, maybe that's another video topic, but going forward, if we make it through that, then it's not really going to be a problem. Like, science will solve the issue of, you know, unwanted pregnancies and all of that. And, you know, just like as humans continue to globalize and mix, there's going to not really be the ability to be racist anymore. We're just going to be some sort of homogenous brown blob. That's the eventual future, you know. And you can either accept those things or you can deny them, but all of those issues are not permanent issues. Like, I don't have a huge problem with racism, again, because going forward it's not really an issue. Whether or not it's, you know, good or bad, it's going away throughout generations. So same thing with abortion. But where it's not, or things that are not going away, are going to be these sins that are universal and are going to be everlasting. And one of those sins is going to be, you know, let's look at gender dysphoria or like pride or, you know, same-sex couples and all of that. So innately, people know it's wrong. I think if you asked anyone who is actually, you know, involved in same-sex relationships, anyone who's a transformer will say, any of these people, if you ask them, would they rather have these feelings and these emotions or not, they're going to tell you not, simply because it's bad. It's, you know, their personal quest that they need to overcome. I don't think you can take a look, like, okay, let's use myself as an example. Plenty of people say I'm like, you know, the G word or like, you know, an F, etc. They've referenced me in that way plenty of times throughout my life. I get it, I have a bad voice. I've never felt that way personally. I've never been attracted to the same sex, but let's pretend I've repressed all of that and that it's true. And, you know, just for argument's sake, you might be thinking that about me after these 2 episodes. Fair. You're entitled to your opinion. It doesn't really matter anyways. I'm a virgin, so, you know, I don't really know particularly, even if I were. And let's pretend that I am, for the sake of this debate. The best version of me is going to be the version that triumphs over that and still, you know, does good in the world. It still either creates a family or creates something that's longer lasting than me that has an impact on society. Now, in my short life, I've had a fairly decent and fairly big impact on society with, you know, the people I've interacted with and the things I've done. Again, you don't need to know my history. No one cares, really. I'm satisfied with it. That's also why I'm satisfied if I get stabbed tomorrow for my beliefs or whatever. You know, whatever will be, will be. The future is not mine to see. But every single person, including the Transformers, like, you could give them the option where they have 2 different pills in front of them. One is going to, you know, transform them on a chromosomal level, give them everything they ever wanted, where they become a girl or whatever, or a boy, and they've transcended all of this bigotry and all these other isms that they dislike and, you know, they claim to protest so loudly. So let's say they could do that, or there's a version of them that overcame that, and then, you know, whatever will be, or there's a version of them that actually didn't overcome that and failed. I would argue that the versions that didn't overcome it and failed and the version that overcame it and succeeded are both not just morally superior, but physically and mentally superior. Struggle makes human beings better, and, you know, you can say, like, I know it's kind of hard to avoid religion as far as discussions about morality and politics go because they're intertwined, and as someone who isn't religious, even though I kind of sound like it now, I understand that, but it's impossible to talk about these things without religion. Repair my pouches. So anyways, as I was saying, got distracted by the Dark Mage. It happens. You know, we're at a temple here praying to unholy demons, harvesting God knows what to create, you know, actual magic. So you'll have to forgive me. Okay. Train of thought. So, I know schizo posting is ever so difficult, but anyways. If you're someone that is experiencing, these same-sex thoughts, or if you're someone that thinks they're the opposite sex, the best thing you can do for yourself is to struggle and to beat it and to progress as a human being. That's your own personal hero's tale. That's your own mythos. And you become something more than that if you can fight it. And that's true for all sins. Like me, personally, I'm a troll. I like to tell lies. It's fun. I've told untold lies throughout my life. And it's not made my life any better. In fact, giving into that sin and giving into that temptation has made a worse version of me, probably in reality. If I was a more honest person, if I was a more genuine person throughout, my early 20s, maybe my life could have been different in so many different ways. It's not that I regret it, because it was fun, and, I did it for the lulz. Let's be clear here. I've always done it for the lulz. But going forward, if I want to improve as a person, if I want to move towards the best version of myself, it's going to be someone that is more honest about a lot of the things I've done. It's not going to be someone that trolls about all sorts of things like, whatever. I've gone on a week-long trip to Florida to have intercourse with, a transformer for fun or whatever. Like things, I'm a virgin, but you get the picture, like things I've told people in the past for memes, or things I've done, playing into the whole, oh, you must be gay because your voice is awful or whatever. Like, we get it. At least I hope we get it. Chat, are you with me? Probably not. But, schizo rambling aside. If people don't fight their demons, if people don't fight the challenges that, whatever, if there's an unmoved mover, if there's a, uncreated creator out there, which logically you can deduce that there certainly might be. That's a possibility. Even the most atheist out there can grasp the argument and can, they can at least appreciate the fact that things are in motion. And if things are in motion, there must be an unmoved mover that put those things into motion. So, whether or not you want to call that God, and certainly it doesn't have to be a Judeo-Christian God, but, that's our understanding of it currently as far as religion goes. And even as someone that doesn't go to church, that I don't know if I'm religious or not. I have a very complicated religious relationship, and just because of my birth and the Amarigolum thing surrounding it, it's very tough for me to place myself anywhere as far as that goes. Where I know which way I would lean towards, but leaning towards something and actually embracing it are two very different things. And so, why is this bad though? Why are people telling lies? And why are people embracing lies and sin bad for, the game, bad for its story, bad for the gameplay? And why does, some characters wearing a rainbow flag matter so much to me? And the answer is because it destroys the mental fabric of society, it destroys the story, it's a betrayal to what it's based off of. No matter what you want to say, like the orc goblin, like old school RuneScape is Lord of the Rings, basically. That's why I used that example earlier. We call that foreshadowing, except it's actually just Skitzo ranting with a stream of consciousness, and there's no foreshadowing at all, and it's just a convenience that I've put these two things together. But, ignoring that, we're going to pretend. We've got a huge imagination around here, at least I hope we do. And so, when you've got stories that involve, the Western mythos, and you don't understand the Western mythos and you don't accept it, if you're, a modern, atomized human being who's completely independent, that's just gray matter splattering on the walls in any given circumstance, and it's all really just a bunch of numbers. It doesn't have any greater meaning to you. One, I don't know anyone that actually believes that. I know people that pretend to believe that for argument's sake, but, everything has at least some meaning greater than, a bunch of ones and zeros, which is why the idea of AI is so terrifying, by the way, if you consider it. The fact that we're now able to prescribe untold meaning, in fact, maybe more emotions and more meanings than regular humans are even capable to these ones and zeros, I think is more of a testament to how powerful this idea is rather than, a hindrance to it. And so, where's the harm, right? And the harm is that if you've ever read Solzhenitsyn's The Gulag Archipelago. Lies deteriorate a society. The reason societies turn Marxist, the reason societies fail, and the decay and the decadence of societies is based directly on embracing lies, telling things that are not true as universal truths. Men and women, etc., that, same-sex marriages are all right. None of this is acceptable morally. Everyone who engages in this behavior knows it's wrong on an intimate and low level. They just lie to themselves and say that, society should accept me, or that my perversions or my sins are somehow applicable and just, and flat out they are sins. The people that commit them know they're sins. They embrace them as sins. Pride by itself and by definition is a sin. And going by a Judeo-Christian understanding, it's a universal evil. And it truly is. There is no justification for this love is love attitude, because you follow it to its logical conclusions and the results are actually horrifying. Love is love, okay, let's talk about, say, the love is love in the Muslim sense. Why should I not be able to consent to Muhammad? Why, what's wrong with child brides? Love is in fact love. Love can come from many places and can look many ways. There is, if you've ever followed Marxism, there's no way that you can say definitively that the praxis doesn't contain some sort of Greek or some sort of Roman idea of, boy love, or all of the other horrors that, we've tried to weed out of society from antiquity. And people have had their justifications, but at the end of the day, the Judeo-Christian value set is, at least I feel, the most reasoned and the truest to whatever the universal truth is, even if it falls short in many ways. And trying to circumvent it and lying to yourself and the universe as a whole and saying that, that this is all alright because I've decided as an itemized individual that I can throw away thousands of years of research, thousands of years of lived experiences, all because I have this innate desire, is horrible. If I actually was attracted to men, let's again use my argument, the best possible version I could be of myself is one that has escaped from that and, still manages to escape from the eye-cell drudgery that I'm in and develop something meaningful, something lasting, goes to the third world or whatever, starts a business, employs people, builds a community, has, a loving and faithful wife, and lives merrily ever after. That's the ideal. And I think virtually everyone would agree with that. And so I'm trying to figure out how to say this. I might as well just come out and say it. So G marriage, or same-sex marriages, are very rare because same-sex people are usually promiscuous. They've usually fully embraced hedonism, and they've suffered for it. 1,000 partners and all of the things that go along with that, all of the impacts on your body and your pair bonding ability. I don't think we need to reference that, but it's a heavy price people pay for a lot of this stuff, just like it's a heavy price people pay for trying to embrace this praxis and this Marxist ideology. And so when I say that, who cares if they're wearing this garment or we have this in the game now, the reason it's so bad is the same reason that, for instance, all of the things I described, the diseased, the broken, the, mentally damaged, the human beings incapable of pair bonding, the destroyed individuals, they matter realistically because all human life matters, because all life matters, including animal life, including every life. I think universally you could say it's a universal truth that any violence is, wrong. And while the universe is uncaring and while we've had to accept it and go through with it, I think moving towards a better future without those things is the ideal. And I think moving towards a future where a lot of these same-sex or these, very damaging ideas from society, it moves us towards what is right and what is good and what will improve people's lives and away from what will damage people's lives. And I don't think anyone can realistically debate the harm I mean, people are going to try because they're going to justify their sin in whatever way they can, but I don't think you can realistically debate the harm caused by, a lot of these things and the impact on it. Like, when I was growing up, it was considered acceptable to, for instance, physically assault people that liked same-sex relationships. That was just the norm. It was considered justifiable when I was growing up to, physically abuse someone if that person engaged in that. And, you can have your own opinion about that, but that's to give you an idea of what society was like before the modern day, Marxists took over and moving towards the praxis. Like, I'm 35, I remember a time when that was socially acceptable. And yet, even during the time when that was socially acceptable, the trans and the, drag queen and the suicide rate of all of these people, the self-ending rate, seem to be an order of magnitude or two less than it is in the modern day when they're accepted. There's, as far as I can see, no logical reason why that this rate continues to increase. We're at what now, 42%? And we're only going up, baby. I can't see any reason that it's increasing, at least because society has grown so kind to it, where even in my medieval clicking simulator, well, again, I am on YouTube. There are things I can't say, but even in my medieval clicking simulator, how do I phrase this? Where it's still something that's to be celebrated, let's say, in my medieval clicking simulator. And so the great difference between that and how it's been recognized throughout history, and the happiness of the people that partake in that, I can't reconcile it in my head. It seems to me that it's not really improving people's lives. In fact, it seems like it's a mental disorder that's being embraced and sin that's being embraced, and it eats away at them and eventually destroys them. If these people could have this pill that turns them into the opposite sex, or like gives them, their civil union that they really want, and everything is respected, and it's not just, some shoddy government contract like it really is, like it's the truest of the true embrace of X, Y, and Z. I don't think they would be any happier, and I think odds are they're probably going to be less happy. I think further delving into the sins and delving into things that damage your life, shockingly, probably are going to damage your life further. And I think beyond a certain point, just like pair bonding and a lot of these things, there is no recovering from your own decisions. Like, I'm lucky in the sense that for my lies and for my, messed up personality and the things I've done throughout my life, and I've made tremendous errors as a person, and like a lot of them have to do with me trolling people. It happens. Like, I've paid for my sins and the trolls I've done throughout my life, and 35-year-old, still inexperienced in everything as I am, and there are many reasons for that, but maybe that's something I paid for, not being a serious person. And I'm still not a serious person. I probably never will be, but it'll be something I will struggle against for at least the majority of my life. And so, if you're one of these people that suffers from gender dysphoria or same-sex attraction, my honest advice is don't be one of the victims. HRT has gone through the gaming community and video games like crack through the African American communities in the 19X's, we'll just say. It's completely destroyed a lot of communities and a lot of video games and this Marxist ideology, and it may in fact destroy all of society. And if society falls to it, it's not a society that's worth saving. It's not worth investing your energy into. It's not going to improve the world if you keep this phantom corpse of bloated husk alive. Just let it go if it falls to Marxism, if it falls to what I feel is the great filter. Oops, bumping my mic. And I'm not going to have a debate with any leftist commentators about any of this. I really don't care. I might release a separate video on that, but debating is pointless. These people only use violence, and they only understand violence because they're so overwhelmed in sin that violence is a valid defense for them, and, you know, obviously I might suffer violence in the form of at least a cancellation, or physical violence, or, you know, political violence, or economic violence, or all the other different forms of violence they're willing to use if you disagree with them, and that's fine. That's something I've already accepted. It just is what it is. You can't, you know, change or fix the world without at least a little growing pain. And so I've explained why I think it hurts the game as a whole, because it degrades the story, it degrades the community, it degrades the people, and those people make up the game. And this is all a millennial problem. Like, this is my generation, and I'm deeply sorry as well. My generation has failed the world as far as, you know, the creative arts have gone, because we have forgotten the basis of our stories. We've forgotten, you know, the archetypical understanding of what Western theology and the understanding of it is, and how it applies to what we're trying to create. And that's why all of our media is garbage, exactly because of that. You know, so it is what it is in that regard. And, you know, so hopefully people stop making themselves horrible statistics. And, for instance, like abortion and like a lot of these issues, humans in however many 100 years it takes us to solve the abortion issue, or the meat issue, or a lot of these other economic issues where PETA finally wins, where, you know, the eventual actual direction history is tending towards a logical and just conclusion. At least one can hope. It might not, and then we might decay and never exist again, and we might fall into Marxism. It happens, but if we are following that trajectory towards a logical and just conclusion, humans are going to look back upon previous humans the way you look back upon previous humans. Like the barbarians we were, like, they would literally crush up the child in the mother's womb and then, you know, sell off the bits and pieces, or they would, you know, chop off the tip of young men for what reason exactly, and then make cream out of it. It's like, yeah, I mean, we're still barbarians in our own ways, and we still have a long way to go as human beings, and we always will. And, you know, we beat that by becoming better, and we beat that by not lying anymore. And that's like a personal anecdote there about the not lying, and trying your best at least to be an authentic human being. At least when it matters. Like, it's still fine to troll your friends. It's still fine to sin a little bit, you know, and nobody's perfect. We live in a fallen world, and we are fallen people. And that's still not a justification for not fighting against your sins and trying to get better. And when the West, if it returns to trying to do that, that's obviously the solution to all of these huge issues. But it's questionable if we ever make it that far. I think we're too far gone now. I don't see any way in which people randomly just start, like, fixing themselves or undoing, you know, the trauma they've caused themselves and the world around them, you know. And if we look at what the next century looks like, we see the Chinese century, and we see the, you know, Marxist century. I'm too lazy to walk. I will always use essence on someone in AFK. It is what it is. I'm a terrible person. It can't be helped. But, you know, as far as the future and where we're going with this, I don't see it any good, and I see the escape from it going to become less and less, and maybe in the future there'll be places that are not political, that are, you know, I would really like men's only spaces and lots of things that are no longer political, or just escapes from all of this, because we really need a detox. And you can argue about dopamine detoxes or denying dopamine from yourself, like in a number of ways, like the way I've constructed my Iron Man, or why those one chunk people have so much fun or find that so compelling. All of that is, you know, easily explained just by dopamine receptors and this understanding of the world and the universe as a whole. But, you know, let's see, how do I phrase this? I'm sorry I'm pausing and thinking so much during actually speaking, but it's because of where I am and how difficult it is to fully express this in the way I would if I were speaking more casually and, you know, not under whoever the new, it used to be Susan, but now we have a different boot that is currently on our neck, you know, so, as it is. How do I phrase it? How do I say this? maybe we just leave it at that. It's probably best to not say anything about that. Sorry for the tease there. Yeah, if you subscribe to my OnlyFans, you can get that content or something. Yeah, my OnlyFriends, but yeah. So why did I quit the game for 6 months over that a while back, and why did I lose all hope in the game, and why am I still playing it now? Is I basically stopped playing old school. I didn't tell anyone because who cares? I'm like a washed up boomer, but I stopped playing it mainly because of that, and I knew where it was going, and I could see the self-destruction. And they've kind of laid off on it, but I know they're going to do it again next year, and it's just what it is. There's really very few places in the gaming world that, and in the world in general, that are like an escape from this socio-political garbage. And yeah, and I might lose my job over some of these videos or whatever and all of that. And so, my work's definitely not a place where I can escape from that. Like, the ESG is all around me. That's all I'll say on that. If you know, you know. If you don't, it's fine. You'll be okay. But yeah, so... let's see, so we've defined woke, racist, and all of that. We've outlined the problem, we've outlined how it's impacting and destroying our media, we've outlined the solution, and, at that point, I think that's probably all I can realistically say about it. I can't go any deeper than that. And yeah, so this was episode 2 of my real-time cancellation speedrun, and yeah, I liked it. I hope you did too. I hope you had fun. Bye now.